Have you ever wondered how we can apply numbers with variables in our everyday lives? I guess not. Well, we're here to construct, perhaps demonstrate, and how to solve a quadratic equation without using a calculator.
Hello, Mathcoholics! We are the Three Mathskeeters, and we love to talk about math all day, every day. I am Jamie, along with Vianne and Rogel, who will join me as we discuss the concepts of quadratic equation using 4 different methods.
To give you a short introduction, more like background information about ourselves, us Three Musketeers are currently studying in Sorsogon National High School under the special program in journalism in 9th grade.
Come and join us as we unravel the hard yet exciting part of mathematics in our first video. What are we waiting for? Let's start!
Before we start discussing the methods or techniques in solving a quadratic equation, let us know first what is a quadratic equation. While a quadratic equation is a mathematical sentence of degree 2 that can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a is not equal to 0 and has a degree of 2. The quadratic equation in standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, wherein ax squared is a quadratic term, bx is the linear term, and c is the constant. A quadratic equation can't be called a quadratic equation if the degree is not 2, where there's no quadratic term and if it doesn't end with equals followed by a constant. An example of a quadratic equation in standard form is x squared plus 2x plus 4 equals 0, wherein a is equals to 1, b is equals to 2, and c is equals to 4. The answer after solving a quadratic equation are called roots or solution of the quadratic equation. But how can we find the roots or the solution of a quadratic equation? There are actually 4 different methods in solving a quadratic equation. This includes extracting the square root, factoring, completing the square, and by using a quadratic formula. Let us start with the easiest method in solving a quadratic equation, which is by extracting the square root. Extracting the square root is simply the process of isolating the square and applying the square root property, whereas the solutions or roots of the quadratic equation is the value of the variable that satisfies the equation. A quadratic equation that can be written in the form x squared equals k, which can be solved by applying the following properties. First is, if k is greater than 0, then x squared equals k has 2 real solutions or roots. X equals positive or negative the square root of k, or x equals positive the square root of k, and x equals the negative square root of k. Second is, if k is equals to 0, then x squared equals 0 has 1 real solution or root where x equals 0. And the last is, if k is less than 0, then x squared equals k has no real solution or root. The first step in solving quadratic equation by extracting the square root is simply just write the equation in the form x squared equals k. For instance, find the solution of roots of the quadratic equation k squared minus 16 equals 0. All we need to do is to move the constant negative 16 to the right, making it a positive number. So it will be k squared equals 16. Then we will just find the square root of both sides of the equation. The square root of k squared is k, and the square root of 16 is 4, making it k equals positive or negative 4. Therefore, the roots or solution of the quadratic equation k squared minus 16 equals 0 is positive 4 and negative 4. Under the method of extracting the square root in solving a quadratic equation is the square root property, wherein if b is a real number and a squared equals b, then a squared equals positive or negative the square root of b. The first step in solving a quadratic equation with the application of the square root property and extracting the square root is isolate the quadratic term or the squared term on one side of the equation, or in simple words, just simply move the constant or the number without a variable or exponent to the right, and remain the quadratic term in the left. The second step is take the square root of both sides of the equation, putting a positive or negative sign before the expression on the side opposite of the squared form. The third step is to solve the remaining equation for x, or simply find the square roots of the term. And for the last step, we all need to do is to check by substituting the values in the original equation. For example, x squared minus 25 equals 0. Said in the first step, all we need to know is we need to separate the constant with the quadratic equation, where the quadratic remains on the left while the constant must be moved to the right. So, the quadratic equation will be written in the form x equals positive or negative the square root of k, whereas in the given example, it will be x squared equals positive or negative the square root of 25. Then, we just have to find the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x and the square root of 25 is 5. Therefore, the roots or the solution of the quadratic equation x squared minus 25 equals 0 is x equals positive 5 and x equals negative 5. For the last step, we have to check if we arrive to the correct answer by simply substituting the roots by the value of x. In the given quadratic equation, x squared minus 25 equals 0. The roots are positive or negative 5, so it will be like 5 to the second power minus 25 equals 0. 5 to the second power is 25, so 25 minus 25 equals to 0. Then 0 is equals to 0.
The second method in solving quadratic equation is by factoring. Factoring means converting the given quadratic expression into the product of two linear factors. Solving quadratic equations by factoring is very simple. You simply just have to transform the quadratic equation into standard form if necessary. Then, factor the quadratic expression. Next, apply the zero product property by setting each factor of the quadratic expression equal to 0. Under this process, we can apply the zero product property wherein if the product of two real numbers is 0, then either of the two is equal to 0 or both numbers are equal to 0. Next, solve each resulting equation. And last, check the values of the variable obtained by substituting each in the original equation. For example, we have x squared plus 7x is equals to 0. As we can see, our given is already in standard form, so it is not necessary to transform it. Next is we factor out both sides of the equation, which leads us to x times x plus 7 is equals to 0. Now we can set the factor of the quadratic expression equal to 0. X equals 0, x plus 7 is equals to 0. Now is the time to apply the zero product property. X equals 0 became x equals 0, and x plus 7 equals 0 became x equals negative 7. Now we can proceed to checking the original equation x squared plus 7x is equals to 0 by substituting the value of x by the number or variable obtained from the given expression. For x equals 0, we have 0 squared plus 7 times 0 is equals to 0. 0 squared is equals to 0, and 7 times 0 is equals to 0. 0 plus 0 is 0, and 0 is equals to 0. That is why x equals 0 is correct. Now for x equals negative 7, we have negative 7 squared plus 7 times negative 7 is equals to 0. Negative 7 squared is equals to 49, and 7 times negative 7 is equals to negative 49. 49 minus 49 is equals to 0, and 0 is equals to 0. X equals negative 7 is also correct. That is why the quadratic equation x squared plus 7x is equal to 0 has two real solutions, x equals 0 and x equals negative 7.
The third method of solving a quadratic equation is by completing the square. Completing the square means writing a quadratic in the form of a squared bracket and adding constant if necessary. This method of solving the quadratic equation can be said to be the hardest method among the four, since this method is kind of complicated and tricky sometimes. The steps in solving a quadratic equation includes the following. First, divide the sides of the equation by a, then simplify. Second, write the equation such that the terms with variables are written on the left of the equation and the constant term on the right side. Third, add the square of 1/2 of the coefficient of x on both sides of the resulting equation, so the left side of the equation becomes a PSD or a perfect square trinomial. Fourth, express the PSD or the perfect square trinomial on the left side of the equation as a square of binomial. Fifth, solve the resulting equation by extracting the square root. Sixth, solve the resulting linear equations, and lastly, check the solutions obtained against the original equation. For example, the given quadratic equation is 3x squared plus 24x minus 27 equals 0. For the step 1, we only have to divide the equation by the value of a, which is 3. 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared, 24x divided by 3 is 8x, and negative 27 divided by 3 is 9, and 0 divided by 3 is 0. So the resulting equation is x squared plus 8x minus 9 equals 0. For the step 2, we only have to move the constant, which is the negative 9, to the right, making it a positive 9. So the equation will be x squared plus 8x equals 9. For the step 3, we only have to divide the value of the coefficient of x, which is b, or the 8, by 2 and square it. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and make it squared. 4 squared is equal to 16. Also, in the step 3, we have to add the square of half of the coefficient of x on both sides of the equation, making it x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 9 plus 16. So the resulting equation is x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 25. For the step 4, we only have to write it as a square of binomial. The square root of x squared is x, while the square root of 16 is 4. So the square of binomial is x plus 4 squared equals 25, or x plus 4 times x plus 4 equals 25. For the step 5, all we need to do is to find the square root of both sides of the equation. The square root of x plus 4 squared is x plus 4, and the square root of 25 is positive or negative 5. For the step 6, all we need to do is to solve for the resulting linear equation. The resulting linear equation is x plus 4 equals 5, and we have to move the constant, which is the positive 4, to the right, making it negative 4. So x sub 1 equals positive 5 minus 4 is 1, and for x sub 2 equals negative 5 minus 4 equals negative 9. So the roots of the equation is negative 9 and positive 1. For the last step, which is to check if our roots are correct, is all we need to do is to substitute the roots to the given equation, or to the value of x. So 3 times 1 squared plus 24 times 1 minus 27 equals 0. The 1 squared is 1, so 3 times 1 plus 24 times 1 minus 27 equals 0. 3 times 1 is 3, 24 times 1 is 24, and negative 27 will be remain and equals 0. 3 plus 24 is 27, minus 27 equals 0, so 0 equals 0. Therefore, x equals 1 is one of the roots of 3x squared plus 24x minus 27 equals 0. For x equals negative 9, 3 times negative 9 squared plus 24 times negative 9 minus 27 equals 0. Negative 9 squared is 81, so 3 times 81 plus 24 minus 9 minus 27 equals 0. 3 times 81 is 243, 29 times 24 times negative 9 is 216 minus 27 equals 0. 243 minus 216 equals 27 minus 27 equals 0. Therefore, x equals negative 9 is also one of the roots of 3x squared plus 24x minus 27 equals 0. Therefore, the quadratic equation 3x squared plus 24x minus 27 equals 0 has two real solutions, x equals 1 and x equals negative 9.
Quadratic formula is a formula that provides the solution to a quadratic equation.
Solving a quadratic equation with the application of the quadratic formula is very easy. The first step is simply just write the equation in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus z equals 0, and identify the values of a, b, and c. Then write the quadratic formula and substitute the values of a, b, and c. Lastly is to simplify and check for the solutions.
As mentioned by Vianne earlier, solving for the quadratic equation with the application of the quadratic formula is very easy. Here is an example. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared plus 4ac all over 2a. The first step is simply just write the quadratic equation in standard form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. The standard form of the quadratic equation is x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Next is identify the values of a, b, and c, wherein the value of a is 1, the value of b is 5, and the value of c is 6. Then, write the quadratic formula and substitute in the values of a, b, and c. So as we substitute the values of a, b, and c, the formula will be x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 to the second power minus 4 times 1 times 6 divided by 2 times 1. If we will solve for this, it will be x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 24 divided by 2, because 5 to the second power is 25 and negative 4 times 1 times 6 is negative 24 and 2 times 1 is 2. Next, it will be x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 divided by 2, because 25 minus 24 is 1. Next, we just need to extract the square root of 1. So it will be x equals negative 5 plus or minus 1 divided by 2. The first equation we gathered is x equals negative 5 plus 1 divided by 2. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4 divided by 2. If we will simplify, it will be negative 2. Next equation is x equals negative 5 minus 1 divided by 2. And negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6 divided by 2. If we will simplify it, it will be negative 3. And the roots we gathered are negative 2 and negative 3. Lastly, we need to check if the roots we gathered correct. For us to be able to check if the roots we gathered correct is to substitute the values of x in the quadratic equation. For x equals negative 2, x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0 will be negative 2 to the second power plus 5 times negative 2 plus 6 equals 0. Negative 2 to the second power is 4, and 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So it will be 4 minus 10 plus 6 equals 0. 4 minus 10 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 6 is equals to 0. So 0 is equals to 0. That means for x equals negative 2 is correct. For x equals negative 3, x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0 will be negative 3 to the second power plus 5 times negative 3 plus 6 equals 0. Negative 3 to the second power is 9, and 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. So it will be 9 minus 15 plus 6 equals 0. 9 minus 15 is negative 6. So negative 6 plus 6 is equal to 0. And 0 is equals to 0. That means x equals 3 is also correct.
Again, we are the Three Mathsketeers. We hope you've learned a lot from this, and we're looking forward to see you again in our next videos. Just like what Albert Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. Thank you, and we'll see you again. Padayon!